by hiding the truth and altering public responsibility. When the government says that military action resulted in collateral damage, the public can accept this much easier than if the government was to say something like, the bombing and burning of towns and villages with jellied gasoline resulted in countless civilian deaths. Collateral damage is easier to stomach than that. Or when military assets are harmed, it doesn't really impact our lives, but when soldiers or when American servicemen and women are dismembered and killed, that does impact us. When agents of the U.S. government claim they do not torture, but rather use enhanced interrogation, it's really easy to accept, like, oh, enhanced interrogation, you know, they must ask really good questions. Even if the same methods like waterboarding, which is an enhanced interrogation method, even if that was used during the Inquisition to try and force Jews to become Christian, which in my mind, that was a form of torture. So changing words can, you know, change what we associate behind the meaning of those. In our social communication groups, the acceptance of euphemism and politically correct language can either be beneficial or detrimental. As I said earlier, when we participate in euphemistic language, we either can improve upon our understanding and meaning, or we can just negate our ability to understand, or negate our ability to negotiate meaning. Euphemisms distort our reality by creating a less vivid picture of our reality, and as a result of this action, we live in communication that is less vivid than it could be. We create taboos about certain words and phrases because it is easier than addressing the feelings we have about the objects and ideas associated behind the words. Taboos, in essence, allow us to hide. Through the processes of negotiating meaning, we seek and find truth. Truth about ourselves, about others, about the world in which we live. Symbols are representations and not actual things. So words are symbols, symbols are representations, and they're not the actual things. And so because of this, it is the context in which we use symbols that makes symbols harmful to meaning. Not all people realize the significance of context in regards to meaning. Given this attitude towards language, it becomes more difficult to distinguish the symbol and the thing symbolized. When we euphemize, we create new symbols that represent the symbols that represent the object, and in so doing remove ourselves further from the object and the meaning behind the object. So if this is an object, the word is podium, but say I euphemize that and say speaking stand. And so speaking stand is removed once from podium, which is removed you know, from the actual what this physical object is, and in so doing it becomes harder to understand and negotiate meaning behind the actual thing. Because we value symbols to this great extent and often fail to recognize the context of how we use symbols, certain symbols have the ability in and of themselves to provoke strong emotional reactions. This concept defines what verbal taboo is. Words, phrases, or utterances that have an established meaning that make people emotionally uncomfortable. Verbal taboo such as this arises when people confuse the symbol with what the symbol represents. Much of Carlin's comedy sought to understand and analyze the relationship between the symbol and the object symbolized. Okay. Yeah, we'll just... My slides are off, I apologize. When we use words regarded as taboo, it signifies a strong emotional connection to the idea behind the word, and when we create taboos surrounding our language, we limit our ability to create meaning. Navigating around the verbal taboos in our language can be tricky, but there are a few strategies we can use to help us to communicate more effectively with people when negotiating or maneuvering around verbal taboo. If we pay close attention to the context in which we communicate with others, we learn that certain phrases that hide certain ideas and objects with euphemisms, they're not always taboo. And in fact, sometimes an even a welcome addition to the conversation. And sometimes the mere fact that they're taboo assigns importance to them, and we should know that we should explore these concepts even further, like enhanced interrogation and torture. But we should not consider certain symbols as taboo if their use or the discussion of their use enhances our ability to negotiate meaning. And the reason we should do this is because communication is all about understanding the world in which we live and negotiating meaning. And when we cut ourselves off by, when we restrict ourselves by labeling things as taboo, we lose our ability to do this. But when we openly accept that things are taboo and that we can talk about them and use these taboos, we in turn increase our ability to understand the world in which we live. I think we have time for questions, right?
Yeah, we have time.
All right.
Yeah, about 5 minutes for questions.
Yeah, how does the word become taboo?
So like in my original presentation, like the last half of my presentation is all about the 7 words you can never say on television, which was one of Carlin's most famous monologues. And it was about the 7 words that, like, in 1975 that were really bad: shit, piss, funk, cocksucker, motherfucker, tits. Those are like the really bad words. I looked into all of those, like the history behind those. Like, so why is cocksucker a bad word? And so this word is, like, the word cock has been around for a very long time. And, like, it meant rooster at one point in time. And then a few centuries went by, and it started to, like, cock could also mean a small spigot through which liquid passes. About a century later, about a century after that usage was adapted, people started using that to refer to a penis. So, and that was about in 1200, I think. So, I guess, that'd be a common application where, like, something practical in everyday life, like a spigot, becomes usage for a penis, which I guess people have issues with. So it's not always the same. So, like, that's just one example. Like the enhanced interrogation, that's like kind of a new one. That became taboo, or it became taboo to say torture because legally the United States can't torture. But we can, if we change the word, we can enhancedly interrogate people, or we can interrogate them in an enhanced manner, which isn't the same, I guess. Yeah.
Would you say that most taboo words or phrases have a relationship to sexuality or the human body?
Yes and no. Like a lot of, like, the 7 words you can have, like, a lot of them, it's all about defecation and sexual intercourse. A lot of them have to do with, like, fucking and shitting. But a lot of verbal taboo in my mind, like the words that I never like saying, are derogatory terms for a specific group. So, like, saying nigger or fag or cunt, those are in their own kind of separate category that I didn't even try and address, because I think that is a lot bigger category. But, like, verbal taboo, like the big ones, like the ones you shouldn't say on television. Like I said, I think you can say, like, nigger and fag on television. Like, it's pretty frowned upon, because those are really really bad words. But, like, you can't say, like, words that expressly refer to sex and excrement, and it expressly says that in like the George Carlin went to the Supreme Court, and they decided, like, because anyways, the decision out of the Supreme Court case regarding Carlin specifically said language is indecent if it is patently refers, or like the obscenity rules in Miller v. California referred to, like, sex and excrement specifically, and then it didn't say anything else about any of those other words. And then with the Carlin Supreme Court case, it also had to do with, like, sex and excrement. So, like, those are the ones that are regulated, but, like, the ones in my mind that are, like, the worst are the ones that refer to groups in a derogatory manner.
And it's okay to use those ones that demean human beings.
On television, I don't think, like the words that I like, the C word and the N word and the F word. I say fuck, but I don't say the F word, like, because I'm personally offended by that. I wouldn't say that, but on TV you can get away with it, like, for the most part. I don't think you can say cunt on TV though.